Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Chewy! How are you, sir?
Good evening. I'm good. Good. Winter has arrived in Otago.
Fuck me! Okay, this is the thing. We've got a lot going on tonight now. We normally do 2 or 3 topics. Tonight we're kind of doing 5. So we're going to move quite quickly, but I can't get past this. We were working in the garden yesterday. It was a lovely 22 degrees. The thing that I've always said about Dunedin, if you don't know the climate and stuff here, it's not that it's people think, oh, you know, South Island cold. It's not necessarily that it's cold. It's that the disparity between 2 days is phenomenal. So today, when I went out at 11 o'clock, I had a 19-year-old having a birthday today. So I went and met up with a 19-year-old and had coffee and stuff for the birthday. And that was at 11 o'clock this morning. It was 8. So yesterday, 22, today, 8. Is disparity the right word? Anyway, a difference in the space of like 16 hours of 14 degrees. That's what's crazy about Dunedin weather. So yeah, it was a chilly one. I got the puffer jacket out for the very first time this year today. Hopefully put it away and it'll be an anomaly. But yeah, Dunedin weather, I don't hate it, but that's the anomaly of it. It's like you get crazy variance from day to day. It's bizarre.
Well, as a more recent immigrant to Otago, let me tell you my tip for surviving.
Yep.
Cheese rolls.
I can't. Don't do that, you dick.
Cheese rolls and soup.
I can't do that.
That's how you get through the next 5 months.
Yeah. No, I've got a birthday coming up in just under 3 months from now. It's a big one with a 0 on the end. And
he's turning 10, ladies and gentlemen. He's finally a big boy.
Finally of age. And I'm going to try and be above 60 kilos down. I'm currently at about 56, 57 kilos that I've lost in lovability, cuddleability. And I'm going to try and be more like 63, 64, 65 kilos down by my birthday in the middle of June. So, yeah. So it's yes. I can't do I can do the soup. I can make soup. That's fine. I can't do the cheese rolls though. In fact, that's what my 19-year-old had today. Went to the cafe. Guess what I had at the cafe? Guess. My partner had this, it was like a coffee cream square. It was about this big with icing and about this much at the bottom and it was probably, you know, that big. My 19-year-old had 2 cheese rolls. One had a hot chocolate, one had a coffee. Guess what I had? And I bought it from the close. I bought it from the cafe. I had 2 bananas and a bubbly water. It almost felt like it was sacrilegious. Hey, look, we're not going to fuck around too much tonight, guys. Thank you so much for being with us. Just want to say to start off with, huge thanks to our I just said sponsors, same thing, to our patrons. Really, really genuinely appreciate you guys. Appreciate you coming on board. Appreciate you being a part of this. I'll tell you and be honest with you that, you know, we're getting about in our hand, because I think Patreon takes about a third. We get about $450 a month at the moment. And, you know, my computer that we're using right now to take this thing down. Oh, shit, I've got to set up my automatic payment for that tonight. I will do that. Just needed a $600 graphics card put into it. $690 actually. So you patrons are really helping us can literally keep this thing going, or else I'd just be a voice. And I know you want to see me as well. And just your little $5 here and there does genuinely help. And if anyone else likes what we do and you're interested in getting on board, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And before we get accused tonight again of being, of course, look at them, they've got beards, the misogynists. The hairy part of that was always the idea of setting a big, hairy, audacious goal. And then I thought, well, along with that, we can also look at the big hairy news stories of the day. Yes, there is a lot of beard hair in this broadcast, but ironically, that's not the reason behind the name. Chewy, anything before we rip off?
You made me grow my beard.
I did. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
I was forced.
at your last job, you weren't allowed to. Oh no, it's because of mask, wasn't it? I remember you cut it right back because
I
of
trimmed it
mask.
right back because of the masks, and now I don't have to.
All right, now Chewy, I'm going to be doing a lot of looking at the screen tonight, so you can have a real good look through those comments. I'm sure I already see them going pretty crazy. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing to say because you are watching us, but just so you're aware, we are live. This is live streaming, so you can join in with commentary, you can join in with chats, you can join in with super chats, and share your thoughts as we're going through. If you're watching this not live, then we're not live. If you're watching this live, then we're live. If you're watching this not live, then we're not live. We can't be live when we're not live.
Thanks for over-explaining this massively, Pat.
All right. Now, there is some actual real for real breaking news. It only came out at about 7 o'clock tonight, and that is Stuart Nash is gone burger. Now, straight away, there is going to be conversations as to why he broke the cabinet manual 2 months ago when he, with that conversation to the police minister, right? That was a clear breach, but he was given another chance. So this is, we're not going to play all the stories, but this is from a couple of months ago. We all know this. We talked about this, the conversation around the, telling his mate who happened to be the commissioner of police, whilst he had been a minister of police, shouldn't we really challenge that decision? And the reality is they should have challenged the decision. They didn't, but it was completely inappropriate and it breached cabinet. Now today, crazily enough, this is not the reason he was sacked, but there was news coming out today about Stuart Nash receiving donations from timber forestry industry, and he's the Minister for Forestry. Now, I was thinking about this today, and I was thinking it's a pretty clear appearance of conflict of interest. Yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like. It could be taken as a conflict 100%. Of interest and appearance, but I was thinking, well, maybe what we should do, because we always try and find the solutions here, maybe what we should do is we should instigate sort of a cabinet rule that if you've got donations from a sector, you can't be the minister of that sector. But then straight away I thought, then if you didn't want someone to be your minister, you could donate to them. So that doesn't actually solve the problem.
No.
It looks like in the story that's playing in mute in the background, will probably come up in the minute on the actual imagery. But over the last 3 elections, he seems to have got between $5,000 and about $30,000 worth of donations from the forestry industry. It seems like a lot of money. However, losing his job as a minister, he'll lose somewhere between, depending on what he was on and what he's going down to. Here's the donations coming up if you want to have a look while we're talking. Somewhere between $70,000 and $140,000 in salary. So that's what he's going to lose in salary, being demoted from a minister to a backbencher. Depending on what he was on, like the backbenchers get between, I think it's 140 and 160. Just for an MP, and cabinet ministers get between like 220 and 300. So in that range of 70 to 140,000 is what he's going to lose. I remember I remember Chewy. There's a lot on. I'm a bit flustered. I'll slow down. Hang on. Okay. I remember a story about when I was working in radio. It was an American story about a guy who rigged a $10,000 giveaway. It wasn't in New Zealand. He was an announcer who rigged a $10,000 giveaway, and he split it with a recipient who was a friend of his. They caught him, they fired him, and he lost a $300,000 salary. So it's always interesting to look at these situations and see if they're driven by money, what's the story? I mean, in America, we hear about lobbyists and we hear about donations buying politicians, yeah? Because they can then go and work for those companies and earn millions. That's not the case in New Zealand. And I'm now wondering, because this hasn't really been a conversation in New Zealand politics, I'm now wondering how money influences politics in New Zealand or politicians, and how little does it have to be to either cause an appearance of a conflict of interest or an actual conflict of interest. And next we'll go to the story as to why he was sacked. But Chewy, do you want to speak to any of that first?
Yeah, like money in politics is something that's really concerned me for a long time. And there's lots of devious little ways that people can get around it. They can donate in strange amounts to people's campaigns and that sort of thing. But when you've got a minister in charge of forestry getting donations from forestry industry, that's just fucked. Like it really is. We were wondering after Cyclone Gabrielle why nothing has been done in years and years and years about forestry slash.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And you know, that's
But that's
immediately
the
where my mind goes.
yeah, but we
right?
don't know that. But that's the
No,
appearance.
we don't
That's
know
what
that.
we're saying.
We don't know that. But you pop that out and it's very easy to connect those two things and you go,
Yeah, for
well,
sure.
I wonder.
Yeah.
And at that point, you know, your confidence in your government ministers goes out the window. And then there's been some stories in the media recently about New Zealand's lobbying industry. Now, if you sack out as a minister and you've been demoted and you've lost money and you've lost respect, and chances are you're not going to get re-elected again because it's quite a current news story going into an election.
Yeah.
Gee whiz, I wonder if those forestry guys that gave you all that money might like your insights on how Parliament works.
Well, insights on how Parliament works is the next thing we're going to show you, which is the reason he was sort of very, very, very close insights as to how Parliament works. I just wonder, and we talked about this with Nanaia Mahuta and her husband, you know, receiving government contracts, that there has to be something you can do within the rules of cabinet that if you have, and I'm not even saying a conflict of interest, because as JK said, and we'll put this up, he declared the donations. So he's done actually nothing wrong with that. Right, he's declared the donations. Anyone could see them. They're public record. Nothing wrong. When I say nothing wrong, I mean according to the rules.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, even if it's an unspoken rule or an official rule, if there's an appearance of a conflict of interest, you can't be a minister in that area. You know, if you're getting donations from the forestry industry, even if it's all above board and fine, you can't be the minister for forestry. You just can't. You have to be a minister somewhere else in government. If your husband's getting contracts from the government, and I'm not saying there's anything untoward in there, but if there is, which has the appearance of, like you're saying, questioning, then you have to decide whether you want to be a minister or not. If you want to be a minister, then you can't lay in the same bed as someone, or let's be less graphic and say you can't have a joint bank account with someone who's getting contracts from the government. I'm not saying Nanaia Mahuta is doing anything wrong. And in this situation, I don't think that Stuart Nash has done anything wrong, but I think the appearance of conflict, and as Chewy just said, the confidence we need to have in our ministers is paramount to, yeah, but it's fine, because that's really the only response. So I just wonder if some tightening up needs to be done around those rules.
I think staying ahead of it is enormously important. I mean, you look at the scandals in the UK with people giving government contracts to mates and companies that their wives have set up and all of that sort of thing. And of course, we know how enormously compromised and corrupted the US system is. Yeah. And we don't want to go down that track. So, yeah, I would hope that somebody is looking at it. But then again, you know, you need someone with the integrity to go, yeah, I don't want this money, or I'm going to make it harder for my party to get this money in the interest.
But you don't have to. But you don't have to say I don't want this money. You can take the money from the forestry industry. It just means you can't be the minister for forestry. That's all. Yeah. I mean, so you're the police minister, or you're the minister of the, maybe not environment because that's forestry, but you know, you just can't be that minister. That's all. So you can still. It's okay. And let me say again, as far as I understand, and I don't want to bring Nanaia Mahuta into this because it's not part of the conversation, but what I'm saying is neither of those examples have done anything wrong according to the rules of Parliament, right? So there's no untowardness there as far as we know. But what I'm saying is, as Chewy says, the confidence that we have in our ministers can be questioned based on what appears or potentially could be a conflict. Now, where there are conflicts is when ministers basically have secret information from within cabinet and then they share that with their donors. That is why Stuart Nash has been sacked. I will play this for you. This is basically, I know it says 15 minutes, but we're only going to play the actual statement made by the PM, and this is what he said at 7 p.m. tonight.
Good evening. This evening, I have advised the Governor-General to dismiss Stuart Nash from all of his ministerial portfolios. Late this afternoon, I was made aware by a news outlet of an email that Stuart sent in March 2020 to two contacts regarding a commercial rent relief package that the Cabinet had considered. In the email, he sets out both his opposition to the decision Cabinet reached and sets out the position that individual members of the Cabinet took in the discussions.
So you got that? So Stuart Nash shared with someone a conversation that was not yet public and what all the ministers thought of that conversation. And he made clear to these people who are his donors that he wasn't in favour of it.
This is a clear breach of Cabinet's collective responsibility and cabinet confidentiality. Stuart Nash has fundamentally breached my trust and the trust of his cabinet colleagues. His conduct is inexcusable. In addition, the two recipients of the email were donors. Troy Bowker and Greg Loveridge via GRL Holdings Limited have both donated to Stuart Nash. They are also commercial property owners who had an interest in the cabinet decision. That crosses a line that is totally unacceptable to me. I expect ministers to uphold the highest ethical standards, and his actions raise a perception of influence that cannot be allowed to stand. In recent weeks, I've sought and been given assurances from Stuart that there were no other instances or allegations of misconduct that I should be aware of. While Stuart was on a final warning, I want to be clear that this incident alone would have resulted in his dismissal in its own right. I consider the matter to be a very serious one. Megan Woods will be the Acting Minister for Economic Development and Acting Minister of Forestry. David Parker will be the Acting Minister for Oceans and Fisheries, and Meka Whaitiri will lead the Hawke's Bay cyclone response on an acting basis.
There you go. So I don't know if you've seen that full statement, Chewy. I've seen it a couple of times now, so I'll give you the floor. What are your thoughts?
The one thing I always wonder when it's a minister or an MP that's under a cloud like this, right? And obviously brought before the leader and go, right, this is bad. We need to get ahead of this. Is there anything else that I need to know? and I just love to be the fly on the wall. No, there's absolutely nothing else to worry about. Okay, cool. Sweet. Let's get back into it. Knowing that the news media is absolutely going to be laser focused on finding something else, anything else.
Well, and this one seems to be, I'll be careful here because I don't know this, but the other two seem to be, the other one's right. The first one seems to be a breach of the cabinet that he shot his mouth off to the police commissioner. The second one seems to be a potential appearance of the conflict. But this one, he's taken information that has commercial sensitivity that is not yet a law that's been talked about in cabinet, and he's passed it on to someone who could commercially benefit from it. To me, seems the worst. However, you got to ask Chippy as well. He used the phrase in there, a clear breach of the handbook. Well, so was the commissioner, and he was still there then. Maybe one of the lessons here is one strike and you're out. You know, maybe that's one of the lessons here for all leaders of political parties, because if you do it, because this will come back and bite Chippy in the ass tomorrow, because it'll be, well, you should have got rid of him. And it's fair fodder. You should have got rid of him yonks ago after the first time. A leopard can't change its spots.
It's like Chippy's in my dog box this week, and we'll get to that later. But yeah, it's hard to say I've made definitive action when it's like strike three. And in an election year, you've got to be sitting there going, we need absolute integrity. We need absolutely everyone to be 100% above board. We can't even have a sniff of impropriety or compromise or any of that. Everybody's going to be looking for it.
Yeah,
we need to be 100% focused on keeping the opposition on the back foot the entire time. And every time something like this happens, they have to go defensive. It's not great. I don't think there's a lot of people that will mourn Nash. He's not the most laboury of Labour MPs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got to sting in the lead up to an election.
I just want to know why. I mean, even giving this sensitive information to a donor who probably chucked you $5,000, like what's in it? Like they're property developers. They're not going to be worth $100 million. They're not going to give you a $5 million salary once you leave Parliament. What's in it? Why is he passing on this sensitive information? Like I've said, he's just lost between 70 and 140 grand, and he's going to probably struggle to get reappointed to be elected in Napier again. He might have just lost his whole political career, might be gone. I mean, Chippy has said a couple of things. He said, Stuart, and I'm not going through the full thing, but it's in that. You can go look it up. I was watching stuff in the NZ Herald. You can go and have a look on their YouTube page. He said, Stuart came in. Chippy said to him what was going on. Stuart offered his resignation, and Chippy said no and fired him. Ooh. And he also said he will not be a cabinet minister again in my government.
Yeah.
So that means if he stays in Napier and he's there next year and they're in there in power, then what? So that could, let's imagine that Stuart Nash comes back, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's going to, but let's imagine that he does. Let's imagine Labor wins again. And then he sits on the back bench for another 3 years. There's another 140 grand a year. So if he was going to be in for the rest of this year and 3 more years, and I'm not saying that is going to happen or I want it to, but if it could be a $500,000 mistake. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Even if they offered you a big, massive chunk of money, like come work for us for a year, we'll give you $1 million. It's like, well, that's 1 year. Then what's happening after that? I'm looking at it from a different perspective, financially only, because I think sometimes in America we hear about politicians being bought, and I'm like, why would you do this? Why would it even do it? Are you just trying to be cool and kind of be, you're like, oh, look, I've got this information you need. What's the purpose? What does it serve Stuart Nash to do this? Is what I'm asking.
Yeah, is it financial or is it ego?
But how? He's just lost 140 grand.
Yeah.
He's lost $3,000 a week in salary. How does this serve him financially?
Yeah, I mean, when you there are people that have good jobs that sneak money out of the till and they lose their jobs because of that.
Yeah.
People are at times very, very stupid, no matter how smart they are.
All right, listen, we're going to keep trucking tonight, but I'll give you space now for any of the messages to do with that story. Do you want to put anything up?
Cool. Okay, so talking about lobbyists and that sort of thing, David here, he's actually named the piece that I was trying to think of. Radio
How dare
New
you?
Zealand.
How dare you put something else from another media source on our? What are you trying to do? Shit.
I mean, Radio New Zealand are definitely trying to eat our lunch as much as
I
possible,
reckon,
but
they're trying to push us off the wall.
In this case, they've done a very good piece about lobbyists around government called Mate, Comrade and Brother. I thoroughly endorse it. It's a really good piece. Go out and read it if you haven't already.
Yep.
Craig Crabstyle, a name that I still love. The lobbyist issue is not about the dollars; it's about control and influence. Yeah, and is it about ego? And
that's what I'm saying. Like, is he trying to be the cool kid? Is it an ego thing? Is it like, I've got this information, I can give it out to whoever I want?
Arrest JK, ban personal donations, all donations to the party. I think that's probably a pretty neat solution to that going forward, but you'd have to get everybody on board to do it, and I can't imagine trying to get that across the line would be easy. But if you want to remove personal influence and the feeling of a minister or someone in charge of a portfolio feeling beholden to someone that funded their re-election campaign, I think that's personally the solution.
Yeah.
Both opposition parties have opposed transparency with donations. So, I mean, to get something across the line, both sides of the house are not going to agree. Because they know any sort of transparency on the right side, they'll see all of their corporate donors.
I wonder if that needs a supermajority as well. If it's a financial thing, I wonder if it needs 75%.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, on to the next topic, because we've got topics to go. Look, if you're with us and we normally meander, tonight's going to be a little bit more getting through some of the conversations, because I added 2 conversations in after we actually did the show, because I do love our hour and a half hour long podcast.
And I think you said to me that this has been up for a while, but I only came across it late in the evening, so that's why I added it in later on. So that we've had this conversation before about Sean Plunket, David Farrier, Michael Organ. In fact, I found a little clip here. Look at those sexy beasts. Oh, this is Inception. Hang on, I should do that. If I do that, then it'll look a bit better. Is that better?
Not quite as weird.
No. Where we talked about Sean Plunket talking about David Farrier, and we're going to play a couple of minutes of this conversation, because we said back then pretty much what Hayden Donnell was saying. Hayden Donnell from RNZ. Oh God, this is RNZ promo night. That Sean Plunket was getting this information, we didn't know this at the time, that was pointing the finger at David Farrier about, having to go to court, family court orders, etc., etc., etc. I'll just play you a couple of minutes of this from, how long ago was it? 5 months ago? Something like that. Responded to Sean Plunket saying, if he hasn't, then this would be a very risky tweet. I should read the first tweet. Sean Plunket said, hey, has David Farrier been to any good court-ordered non-violence courses lately? So that was what the tweet, and that was Hayden Donnell's response. Because, of course, if it's not true, that would be defamatory. Because even though it's got a question mark on it, and as Mr. Plunket and some people try to do, they think if I'm just asking a question, then I'm covered by, I'm not stating anything, I'm asking a question. It's a pretty stupid way to think of the law, in my opinion. And you can see there's a fair bit of traction there. I mean, it's not hundreds of thousands, but, there's a fair bit of traction there. Hayden Donnell then went on to talk about this new film released by David Farrier, which I haven't seen yet. I don't think any of us probably have. And Hayden Donnell said, I just looked up David Farrier's new film, Mr. Organ. And it's about an obsessive man with a history of taking people in with what proves to be false information. So this is talking to Sean Plunket. Hope you haven't been fooled by anyone like that. So that was the conversation we had several months ago. We made it very clear. Our opinion was basically, if Plunket is wrong, he could be in trouble. Now, the actual reason he might be in trouble is not that, because it then was portrayed what happened. It was then put out there that David Farrier did have a cease and desist or whatever it was from the family courts. But what's happened over the last 3 or 4 or 5 months is Sean Plunket and others have been talking about this, and David Farrier hasn't. And the reason David Farrier hasn't is because David Farrier couldn't. Let me read this to you. This is from a Webworm released today, and if you want to go check it out, webworm.co, how Michael Organ weaponized the family court, ... and Sean Plunket.
Sean Plunket was a weapon.
Well, he's some kind of fucking weapon. So here's a couple of sentences from it. I've actually messaged David. I've messaged him 2 or 3 times. We've never got him on, so I don't expect we'll get him. But if we do, I'm not going to. It's a very long read, but it's a very interesting read, and it lays everything out for you. You should go check it out. Webworm.co. This is the thing that David says. Now, the thing about family court proceedings is that they are notoriously confidential. All the names involved are heavily suppressed. I'd go so far as to say violating suppression in family court cases is taken even more seriously than other courts in New Zealand. This is partly because the family court often involve kids, vulnerable young children stuck in horrific situations. Put it another way, as a journalist, you might be tempted to push suppression on a juicy court case, but when it comes to the family court, you don't dare push a fucking thing. Those names stay under lock and key. Right. So we've got a pretty clear understanding as to information that's suppressed within the family court. So this is all information about what Sean Plunket then did, who had a copy of the family court order and sent out a series of tweets. Has David Farrier seen this? And if you go read the Webworm, David will say he hadn't seen it at that time. So Sean Plunket's being fed things by someone, perhaps as Hayden Donnell's message said, maybe manipulated. Hope you haven't been fooled by anyone like that. Perhaps that was what was going on. So Sean Plunket starts tweeting out copies or versions of the family court order. He also tweeted, he tweeted a lot, the notice about me being ordered to attend an anti-violence class. So that's why he may not be in trouble for saying those things, because there was things in the courts about it. So this is what David has now said today, and this is where Sean Plunket may be in trouble. To Sean's credit, the documents he posted had all the names redacted, except they hadn't been. They'd been redacted with an old school felt tip pen, and Twitter users quickly dragged them into Photoshop and saw who was involved. David then says, I have digitally redacted the felt tip redaction to make it an actual redaction. So this is here is just a felt tip, and obviously it's been redacted, but then people took it out and actually was able to remove enough of the felt tip to show who the names were. So the suppressed names, because of Sean Plunket, were no longer suppressed. In other words, when Sean shared those family court documents, Sean had also shared the suppressed names of those involved. Sean Plunket had shared confidential details of a family court case he had absolutely nothing to do with. Now, I don't know how the courts will treat, well, I covered them up in black ink, but the reality is Sean Plunket put information out into the public that people could then use to identify suppressed names. My wondering, and it's just a wondering, I've got a question mark at the end, Mr. Plunket, is he fucked because of this? Does some of that $300 million a year of government money going to his funders and then to him going to end up in court cases because of his actions? Family court suppressed names have gotten out. Joey?
This might surprise you, Pat, but I fucking hope so. Plunkett's been in the media long enough that he knows this. But because he's off on his own little thing where the Broadcast Standards Authority doesn't, he feels unstoppable, untouchable. He just says and does whatever he wants. I hope that they come down on him. I really do. I just don't know. The other thing I saw this morning is David Farrier talking about the cost. It cost him $25,000.
25 grand, yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
And he seems to have stuck to the rules while no one else was.
Yeah. So look, as I said, we've approached David. Well, I've approached David. I've had several conversations with him on Facebook before. He's never come on for whatever reason, which is absolutely his right. Unlike Sean Plunket, I won't be crying that, such and such won't come on in my show. He's all entitled not to, but I've approached him, and I'll just keep you updated as to if we get him, if we decide to get him. I'm sure he'll be doing media. I understand he's pretty good friends with Tova O'Brien. There's probably going to be a conversation with her on Today FM. So worst case scenario is maybe we'll get some video or audio footage off another media outlet, and when that comes up, that comes up. Anything we want to chuck in there? I mean, look, I missed. Where did it go? Brad says can't see. I can't see how that would be Sean's fault, and that's why I have a question mark at the end of mine as well, Brad. But what I can say is, information that has been suppressed is now in the public domain because of Sean Plunket's actions. I think that's a fair statement. The question is, would a court hold him culpable for that? I've got no idea, because he attempted to redact it. I mean, like, I don't know, what's something offensive if I put a sticker over it, but someone's able to peel the sticker off and breach a rule, I'd probably still be held accountable for it. I don't know. It's just I mean, if Sean Plunket hadn't did what he did, then those suppressed names wouldn't be out. So maybe we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you see it so often, and it's usually from a certain age group. People trying to redact things from an image that they're putting online, and they just literally pop it in MS Paint and drag a black marker across it, not knowing that someone can do the same thing and just take the black marker away. Yeah, boomers are something else. Sean is a special boy.
I actually never really thought about that. I mean, I've put things up before that I've redacted, but I always do it in Photoshop just because I could just drag it's easier if you're doing something digitally just to drag a rectangle over it and infill it. But I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know if I would have thought of that either, using a vivid and going over it and then having people take it off. But I guess that makes me a boomer, perhaps.
Yep.
Not yet. Soon. Not yet. Not yet.
Remember, boomer is a state of mind.
Okay. I thought it was a state in America, down south, isn't it? Where they hate all the gays. Isn't that where boomer is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any of the messages? Oh, look, I'm just going to ask you this because I'm looking elsewhere. Any of the messages we want to get up about that? I'm sure people are interested in the Karen.
Just lots of people agreeing with me that in arguing over the finer points of whether Sean Plunket is a tool or a weapon.
Weapon can be used in the positive, like what a weapon. Like actually, like if you're like what a weapon. Like that could be positive. I think tool never can be. So I'd go with tool.
Yeah, I think I'm using it in the Scottish vernacular.
Right, weapon. What a weapon.
Yeah,
look at you, my wee weapon.
I don't know if we can really speak to this, but Brenda in the chat has missed how Plunkett's got the document. I guess it's never really said it. I guess the implication is
read the Webworm. read the Webworm. It seems to be fairly obvious. At least it seems a fairly obvious connection. I think that if you read the Webworm, the connection has been drawn straight to Mr. Organ. Has been feeding it because of David Farrier's writing about it, and he's allowed to write about it because this court case was a couple of months ago, I think, but it's only just now he's been given permission to write about it. He's not allowed to use all the names, but one of the names from the family court order is Mr. Organ. So he's able to use that name, and go read the Webworm. And I think Chewy's right that there's not 100% guarantee, but it seems to be a pretty obvious connection that what Mr. Organ seemed to know very quickly was tweeted out by Sean Plunket, including stuff that Sean Plunket was writing and then Mr. Organ was responding to on his Twitter feed, confirming what Sean Plunket had just written. So, can we say that's a slam dunk 100% guarantee? Probably not, but Occam's razor. It's the fewest number of assumptions to get to a conclusion would be that that's where it looks like it's come from, and that is an honest held belief. Litigious people.
My personal hope is look, David Farrier is a tenacious wee bugger. I certainly hope that he has the resources to carry on with it, and because he doesn't tend to let things go. Yeah, like that's how this whole Mr. Organ thing started. It was remember, it started with a story about someone clamping cars outside a second-hand shop. Yeah. And now here we are talking about it almost 10 years later.
Yeah. And look, I guess the other thing is go to David's Webworm, become a subscriber. You know, like when the case came out against Arise Church, and then Arise did the dirty on the person that they'd employed to do the report on Arise Church, and she had legal bills, David just said to his subscribers and his followers, let's help this lady out. And they raised, it was about 20 grand, I think. They raised it for her in 24 hours. So this fucking church screwed this woman over, who they'd employed to help them, and then David Farrier and all his followers actually were the ones to support her. So what goes around comes around. Karma's a bitch, and it's also a good thing. David, he's had $25,000 worth of fees. He's probably not going to put his hand out and go, can we have some money? But he'd probably be stoked with some more subscribers and stuff. So if there's there's a paid version of his Webworm stuff, go and sign up, flick him a few bucks and help him out for the work he's doing.
Absolutely.
All right. We would have talked about this yesterday, but because we had the wrapping up of the Posey Parker week, and we've jumped to it today, I had more information that I think we'll get to, because I know, Chewy, you're really keen to talk about Marama as well. So I'm just going to...
We're making good time at this point, I think. Okay. I think we'll get to it.
All right, let's just start. Okay, so this is Winston Peters on The Nation in the weekend, and there's some interesting chats and conversations from this, and there's a very interesting follow-up with Mike Williams, the former party president for Labour. Let's have a listen to Mr. Winston Peters doing a Winston, as I call it. He's doing a Winston.
Oh, what I took from your speech yesterday was that this is a war on woke.
Well, it is, because what we're seeing, sadly, in this country, and so many people are the victims of it, is a full-scale attack on Western values and the kind of society which is the reason why so many tens of millions want to come and live in this country, because we have democracy, we have freedom. And our institutions are under full-scale attack, subtly, without any authority, any mandate at all. And we've got to defend ourselves here and turn that around. We've got to win this battle, because otherwise we will never recognise the inheritance our parents gave us.
Well, there was a lot of outrage in your speech, sort of an apocalyptic tone. It was a grim picture you were painting, Winston. There was a sense of sort of growing overreach by the left or the government, conflict over race, identity, and sort of the nature of progress over our values. It feels very much like sort of culture war politics. Do you think we are in a culture war here in New Zealand?
They have declared the war, and they're not going to win it.
Who's they?
Well, you've got a whole lot of elitist people.
So they're going with that conversation around who's they, which is quite an interesting conversation. Of course, he names no one at any point, at any stage. So every time he's asked a question, he doesn't really have an answer for it. So that was sort of the opening and the introduction to it. They go into a part of the conversation where he talks about health being the number one issue. It's a really important point here, and it's about the culture war situation as well. And it's about the sort of focusing on the minor things. Winston Peters is talking about things like, why are there words in Māori in hospitals, right? And then he talks about health being the biggest issue. And she rightfully calls him out on saying, if health is the biggest issues, what is changing the words back to English going to do to help the health situation? So it's a really good synopsis how to maybe combat this narrative of the woke or the PC or the culture war situation. And the interviewer does a really good job.
You've said health is our number one crisis.
It is.
But the only concrete health idea that I could see in your speech yesterday was to rename Te Whatu Ora. And that is not going to make a blind bit of difference to people on waiting lists, is it?
I don't understand why you've asked that question that way. This is the first of hundreds of speeches around this country. You've only got so much time to say so many things. And I set out all the circumstances which we're going to focus on in the coming months in this campaign. I'm saying, first of all, attend to health, because in health, whereas in other things you can fix it up over time, in health, people die.
Yes,
and they're
that's right.
dying without treatment. And I'm saying to the people, the number one part of our policy is, this is your biggest crisis.
Yes. And so you're renaming, but so renaming Te Whatu Ora is not going to stop people dying. It's not going to stop people waiting for treatment. It's not going to fix the problem. So why bother with the energy on that? Why not get straight to the heart of the problem and give us something solid?
Can I ask you this? Why bother with a name that 95% of the country doesn't understand?
Yes, but you can spend a lot of, this is one of the pitfalls, I suppose, of cultural war politics, is that you can spend a lot of time and energy changing names and sort of reverse, virtue signalling in reverse. But actually, it doesn't solve anything for anybody. It doesn't solve my problem if I'm waiting to get specialist treatment. Why not attack the big problems?
Well, we are going to.
When?
Well, I couldn't run the whole campaign in 1 hour at how I can, before 400 people, could I?
You could put out a policy.
I set out what our priorities will be and said, watch the space as we unveil this over the next 6 months, and we will. Now, it's not cultural war. We are stopping people.
Hang on. He just said they started the war. Remember that? Yes, we're definitely in a culture war. They started the war, and now he's saying it's not culture war.
Or undemocratically, elitists in the extreme, taking over the country from the mass majority who don't like what they see.
Do you know what the issues are for many of the people?
So that was pretty much that side of things. I'm going to keep trucking through these clips because the next ones are only about 30 seconds or 60 seconds each. Actually, no, I'm going to leave that one because it's about ram raids. We're over that. He goes very much into ram raids, and he does it like he basically uses the national talking point around ram raids. And as you'll hear Mike Williams say later on, he's starting the same conversation that other people are doing better. They also then talked about people in prison. So the interviewer asked him very bluntly about, if you're going to make all these changes within like the justice system, what are you going to do with people going to prison? Are you going to fill up the prisons? How many people are going to be arrested? And that was a conversation around this.
A whole lot of people in prison who should not be there. It's a waste of $135,000.
Did you get that? A whole lot of people in prison who should not be there. And so I'm thinking, yeah, maybe, if they're in there for drug offences, if they're...
Cannabis law reform, when he's on board.
I know, that's exactly what I've written down. So that's how we started. There's a whole lot of people in prison that shouldn't be there. Do you think that's who he's talking about, Chewie? Let's have a listen.
It was the taxpayers' money. That man was sent for fraud from the Western Council the other day for $77,000 of fraud being sent to prison. He's a waste of time in prison. He should be out there working for the community.
So you want to take white-collar criminals out of prison and put people who...
I want to say something sane and sensible, and I hope you listen.
I am.
We're going to take people out of prison who could be out there in the community doing something for the community while they're serving their sentence, and because they're not a threat to the community because of the nature of their crime.
So that's probably 90% of prisoners. So that's 90% of prisoners he's going to be releasing out. Now, this is my favorite part. We're going to play this bit in its entirety. It's only 90 seconds. He gets asked about, it's like a MAGA conversation, when was America great? He's asking, who are we taking the country back from? And then the pièce de résistance at the end is he gets asked, and this is what I've teased, and if you've read what our promo is coming up for tonight is, he gets asked about his responsibility for the Labour government that's in there today. And you don't see Winston Peters very often do this, but you see it in this clip.
You've also said we've got to take the country back.
Yes.
Who from?
From those people who are seeking to change it without any authority mandate, have never campaigned on it and doing it silently behind your back.
The government has a pretty strong mandate right now.
Already? For what?
They have a majority in Parliament. I'm not sure that you can get a greater mandate.
Did they have a mandate for light rail, which has gone to now 29 billion and rising? No, they didn't. Did they have a mandate, for example, for capital gains tax? No, they didn't. Guess why? Because we are the handbrake that stopped them.
Yeah, Well, the great irony is actually that you were the person who put them there. You were the queen maker all the way back in 2017.
What's the face?
So
Oh,
you
here
let
we-
the wolf into the hen house, and then you got locked out.
This is extraordinary. This is extraordinary. Can you remember who ruled out Winston Peters? All those years before? No, stop. Please stop.
You are.
For
Please.
years they ruled
Please
me out.
stop.
And then the first
No,
thing...
I'm not talking about this. I'm saying that you
I'll let you into confidence. And let me into
Jacinda
confidence.
Ardern, the Prime Minister,
I'll let you
back in
into confidence.
2017.
And repeating a fallacy does
You
not
remember
improve your
2017
questions.
So
was
you
it?
didn't, mate. You weren't the queen
The first
maker.
thing that Bill English said to me
Oh,
on the first meeting, we had a meeting with the National Party first.
Oh, I don't want to relitigate all of the bits and
No,
pieces.
no, I want
but
to
the
tell
thing is that it was your
Excuse
support
me,
that put the Prime Minister, that put Labour into
you're going down
government.
a foxhole, you're going to find a fox.
well, it's better than going down a rabbit hole. Then, and
Oh!
and people who are on the right, who are potentially national supporters, I don't know if they've forgiven you for that yet, Winston. What are you going to do to win them back?
Babbling on like that does not help your argument. Can I?
so there you go. So
Can I just say,
yeah, go.
down the rabbit hole, she dropped that like a fucking hand grenade.
Yeah. but this point being, right, and so she did it very, very well. And I'm sorry, I forget the name of the reporter. I apologize. Someone in the chat will tell me and I'll give her due credit. But it's a little bit like what's about to happen with Mike Williams. We have to remember what went on last week, last month, last year, last 3-year cycle to make a decision on what's happening today. Winston Peters was the reason that Labour was able to form a government in 2017. He's the reason, right? So if you're someone who thinks, and that I'm not saying this is my or Chewy's thought, but if you're someone who thinks that this government has overreached, that this government has been invasive, that they've been, what's the word in South Africa where two races were separated? What's that word that's just jumped out of my head? Segregation. That they've done
segregation in that context.
But if you believe that segregation was something real under the Labour government, there's an element or a part of you that has to thank Winston Peters for this, because without Winston Peters, they don't get in 2017. Without Winston Peters, they don't get a massive because they're in during COVID re-election in 2020. It was 2020? Yeah, 2020. Yeah. So he has apartheid. Thank you. Look at all these lovely people. Because I'm a moron. So he has a direct line of responsibility to today's Labour government. So if you don't like Labour, Winston Peters has some responsibility for the government of the last 6 years, and that can't be forgotten. And she did it beautifully, Chewy.
Yeah. No, that was like Winston is someone that can run an interview if you let him, and he'll just do it with bluster and badgering. But yeah, that was beautifully done. Winston's an agent of chaos. He always has been. He has jumped parties. He has been kingmaker in multiple elections. He's probably the one that's benefited most from MMP since we changed that system. Because he has had the balance of power. And when you think, what actual overall benefit has he had to this country, I really struggle to think about anything more than free bus rides for pensioners and a gold card.
Yeah.
That's about it. The man's
no. We credit Sherry. The wine box was significant. The wine box investigations were historically significant. I
might have to read up about that because I didn't follow. I was too young at the time.
Significant. Same. I'm about to have my 20th birthday party. Remember? So historically significant was the wine box. You have to give him that, right? And there's no ever going to be taking anything away from that to do with the wine box. And if you don't know it, we can cover that another night, or you can go and read up on it. But that is a feather in Winston's cap that no one can ever take away from him. Now, these interviews that I'm seeing now are the first time. Winston Peters is an orator. He's very, very clever. He's very quick. And I'm not saying this to be disrespectful. It's an observation and nothing more. He is looking slower on his feet when it comes to speaking than I've ever seen him before. There were some fumbles and some stumbles in there. Not like a Joe Biden or a Donald Trump fumble and stumble. Not get me wrong. But he doesn't necessarily seem as switched on as he once was. There might only be a 10%. I'm not saying he's not fit to serve or anything, but there is a difference to a Winston of 6, 9, 12 years ago, which you'd expect at about, what is he, 177, something like that?
Famously, he greeted Captain Cook at a pinstripe suit, which was what the fashion at the time. Yeah, look, he is a monolith in New Zealand politics. I think he was here when they invented it. But yeah, he is well past his prime, and if you follow him on social media and that sort of thing, he might deny culture wars. He's always been about culture wars before they were called culture wars. He has latched on to the idea of woke more than anyone. And my challenge to the media is, when he starts to run with that, what do you mean? Define it, because all of these people that like Plunket does it as well, thrashes the word woke. What do you mean?
Well, we know what Plunket means. Because he's told us, he's told me, and I've played it on the show. He means, if I don't agree with you, you're woke. He literally said that.
Exactly. But these people are quite willing to throw it around and cannot define it. He put a government, look, as you said, credit where it's due. He put a government that had a world-class COVID response. There are thousands of people that are alive now that wouldn't have been.
Thanks to Winston.
Thank you, Winston.
Thank you, Winston. Thank you, Winston, for the efforts that the Labour government that you put in did with COVID. All of our response. Thank you. Thank you for the mandates, Winston. Thank you for the vaccines, Winston. All of it. Thank you.
Yeah. He'll love that. But yes, he had a chance to just go and enjoy his friggin' retirement and his free airfares and that sort of thing. But like the Candyman, anytime someone mentions him, he comes bloody back.
Don't look behind. All right, we're going to keep trucking.
Yes,
because there's more to go, and this is to do with a bit with Winston. Mike Williams was a host on the same show, and this is what he had to say about the response from Mr. Peters.
Familiarity breeds contempt, and it was a very familiar speech. There was nothing new in it at all. I'd hoped for some blockbuster statement or policy. The attack on wokeness, well, everyone's doing that. He's in a lot of company there, and a lot of them are doing it a lot better. I was very disappointed because he can be extremely entertaining on his day, and he just wasn't.
Well, that's one of the things about Winston that does frustrate me a little bit. He is very entertaining, but I would rather have boring and accurate and safe, and these things that I'd rather have someone who's good with accounts than someone who is a good juggler, to be running my government. Not saying that, you know what I mean. There's one other thing with this Mike Williams, and then we'll get to the tweets, and then we'll go on to the last conversation, or the text, I should say, is that Mike Williams brought up this very, very important issue. We just talked about history and remembering where we're at and what we're at. They were talking about the policy released on this panel. They were talking about the policy released by National this week about, the reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever, reading, writing, science, and whatever the fourth one was, language, whatever it was, and how National wants it all to be, or reading, writing, and maths for being an hour a day, that sort of thing, because it's based on the yardstick which is taken at 15 years old of who can and can't do what, right? So our 15-year-olds are in a terrible state now, we're being told, compared to where they were. Mike Williams makes an incredibly important point that I think needs to be repeated again and again and again and again and again. Maybe we'll put it on our soundboard, and again and again, by every journalist speaking to the National Party about their policies to do with schooling, and again and again and again. And this is what he said.
Young enough.
A point here. Right. Fran is quite right. We're flipping down the OECD ratings when you look at 15-year-olds. Now, a 15-year-old's formative reading and writing learning period was under National. They created this problem with their national standards, and what they are trying to do is revive that. It doesn't work. You can't rigidly tell teachers what to do. We're too diverse a society for that. Let me reveal that I spent the first 6 years of my working life as a school teacher. So I was absolutely incensed at this policy, and the fact that people didn't notice that it was National who largely caused the problem we're now dealing with.
So That could not be said more clearly.
Yep.
And it needs to be repeated again and again and again and again and tweeted. I'm sure if we tweet this to Calvin Morgan, it'll get 100,000 views. That seems to be happening with tweets that we send him. And again, that Mr. Luxon and the National Party are pointing to 15-year-olds today and talking about where their level of competence in the academic scheme are. All the teachers that we've been talking to and principals that we've been talking to are saying we told them this 10 years ago, the National Party, that this would be the path for national standards. They put national standards in. They instituted a new way of learning in the 15-year-olds' formative years. Those 15-year-olds are now failing, thanks National. Whereas the narrative National is trying to spin is, look what's happening under Labour. Hang on. When these kids were supposed to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and those kinds of things, it was under you guys and your national standards, which the whole education industry said don't do. This point has to be repeated 1,000 times a day around New Zealand this year. Chewy?
Yeah, absolutely. Like trusting National to come up with a plan with education, I think runs into a couple of things. You can't turn a profit out of a school as much as you want to. And they're going to look at it from a business sense of view. The KPIs. Let's get the key performance indicators. Let's get some buzzwords that makes us look tough on these happy teachers and these kids in their baggy jeans doing the RAM rates. If you dedicate 3 hours of the day to these topics rigidly, it leaves nothing in the tank for anything else. And you are just basically churning out, I think, drones that are going to be acceptable to the workplace, but you're not churning out thinkers. You're not churning out creators. It's just such a weirdly over-focused point of view, and they're casting people's minds back to the old days where it was just reading, writing, and arithmetic. You're talking about something from fucking 40 years ago. The world has changed. Education needs to change. The way we treat kids needs to change because their world is changing. The old rules do not apply. If we look back to the old form of teaching, I wouldn't have got through my schooling.
Yeah.
It was only due to creative teachers that had the room to make space for me, to learn something, to keep me in the classroom. Previous relatives, older relatives of mine, they never made it past 15.
Right. Yeah.
So I would hate to see a return to that. And clearly people in the education sector would hate to see a return to that.
All right. Last subject for now. Buckle up, people. I think we're going to be here for another hour.
Mm-hmm.
And look, can I ask this question? Does having COVID give you a swollen head?
Oh, he does look a bit puffy.
It doesn't. I'm hoping it's all right. Maybe it's just the angle of the camera. It doesn't even look like, unless he's a doppelganger. Unless it's like, how Donald Trump had 7 people that looked like him.
Oh, we're into some counterspin stuff now. He's been replaced.
Christopher Luxon suggests Davidson apologized to white cis men for violence comment. I won't necessarily go through the whole story because that's pretty much the headline. What I will do is go to the press talking to Marama in the hallway today, and they approach her about this desire from some of the opposition parties for her to apologize publicly. And this is a couple of minutes. We'll play the whole thing. This is Marama's conversation.
I have clarified what I intended to say and particularly affirm and acknowledge victims and survivors who may not have seen themselves in my comments and wanted to make sure I affirm their experiences.
The National Party is calling for you to apologise to those who you offended, i.e. white cis males. Will you apologise to them?
I have made things clearer in my public statement about what I intended to say, and particularly to the community, the experts in the field, to continue.
So she's staying on topic.
Can you go through what was going through your head? What was happening sort of at that time? Obviously, there was the protest and sort of what the situation was where you made those comments.
In my public statement, I remind us that there is some misinformation about who is a risk to women, and particularly the aim at trans people, which is simply not true. And that's what I have clarified in my public statement.
The way that the Prime Minister described this, in terms of somebody from his office talked to somebody of your office to make this clarification, is that exactly what happened?
I wanted to make this clarification. That was important to me, so that's what I did.
But the way that he's described it, is that the truth?
I won't get down to who said what first. What is really important, that I wanted to clarify what I had intended to say.
Isn't it quite important? Isn't it quite...
How are you feeling? After,
Thank you very much for asking. I'm healing well, thank you.
Yeah, the Prime Minister mentioned that you're suffering a bit from that bruising after the adrenaline's come off. Are you thinking that you might need to take a couple of days, or are you soldier on?
There's a lot of work to do, and I'm in a good enough condition to keep going.
How are you feeling about how this is all playing out? Are you frustrated with having to answer these questions, or do you get it because you're a minister?
I acknowledge that I should have been clearer in my words. I normally take incredible care. I understand the importance of my language and my work, and this is how much focus I normally take in the language that I use, which is why I have clarified it in my public statement. The whole morning was charged. There was beauty and love and solidarity for trans people who are far too often discriminated, oppressed and marginalised. And there were some horrific and have long-standing horrific aims at trans people being the biggest threat to women, and that is simply not true. So when the far-right media came to me, I was still in that charged environment as well, which is why I should have taken more care with the words that I use.
So she said a couple of times, the statement I released. It just would be good for us to check the statement that she released, so then we all know what was said. She kind of synopsized it, but this is off RNZ. Violence is unacceptable in any community, and as the minister responsible for Aotearoa's first ever plan to eliminate family violence and sexual violence, I am committed to an Aotearoa where all people are safe and can live peaceful lives, she said. Women are overwhelmingly more likely to be victims of family violence and sexual violence at the hands of men. It is also important to acknowledge the disproportionate impact violence has on our rainbow whānau and diverse communities. I should have made it clear in my comments that violence happens in every community. My intention was to affirm that trans people are deserving of support and to keep the focus on the fact that men are the main perpetrators of violence. I will continue to stand with my trans and non-binary whānau and support action to ensure that everyone can live their lives without fear or hate or discrimination. So I will throw the ball to you, Chewy, and maybe am I leaving now? Is this your pulpit, or what are your thoughts?
I'm really impressed with that stand-up that she did, like, as far as like staying on topic, clarifying what she meant to do. Like, I don't think there's any wiggle room. You can't spin that another way. It will, and because of that, it will not get as much coverage as the footage that Counterspin have done, and the main media networks have decided to run with almost no critical input and no context given. As far as Luxon jumping on she owes an apology to all cis white men.
Look, let me just say this. Let's just say, I don't think that's a quote from him. I think that's a conclusion, because what the media, well, have a look, because I'm pretty sure what the media is, he has said is she needs to apologize to the people who she offended. And then the implication is it's cis white men. I could be wrong, but I'm not entirely sure he actively said, which if you have a look at my story, I guess that's why it's not in quotes. Like if you look at my story, says Luxon suggests Davidson apologize to white cis men. So I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm not going to stand absolutely by it. But I think that there's been a conclusion that who has been offended, it's cis white men, which is not actually true. I'm not offended. Just have a look. Go for it. Have a look. See if there's actually a quote there. I guess we are splitting hairs a little bit, but it would be still good to know whether that's the case or not. I said this last night, Chewy, and I think we were a little bit on a different camp each other. It wasn't a smart comment to make. Yes, there is going to be all sorts of issues. She's just been hit by a motorcycle. The adrenaline's flowing. It probably wasn't a good time to make a statement. Maybe that's the lesson here, is to not actually make a statement at all when you're in that situation. And it did need to be walked back a little bit. Now, in saying that, we have heard from people who work in family violence. We played some clips last night of them saying that their experiences are that, and I think the lady said last night, 95% of the people they work with are the victims of white cis men committing violence on them. There's another really important thing to know, is that we put up some stats last night that were a part of a story that talked about convictions. Convictions aren't necessarily the way to find out who's committing the violence.
No, not
because we all also know that minorities, Māori in particular, have a worse time of it in the courts than Pākehā. And a Māori and a Pākehā are in a court under the same charge. Research will show that Māori is more likely to be convicted. So in saying all of this, it doesn't necessarily mean that white cis males aren't the main perpetrators of violence. It doesn't mean that they're not, but it definitely means aren't the only perpetrators of violence, which is basically what was said in that counterspin walk up.
Certainly, judging by social media today, there are a lot of white men out there that have feel personally attacked by this and definitely venting it on.
Are they those left-wing snowflakes that we always hearing so much about?
No, it's just been really notable that it's, in the spaces that I've been in, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, that sort of thing, people putting out like, Marama's made this racist statement. And it's just like, is it though?
Yeah.
Because, even on the most basic numbers, and I'm not talking about getting into the real nitty gritty of arrests and reports and convictions and stuff like that, this country is 70% white. Like, just from that, men are more likely to commit acts of violence. And therefore, you can very easily say that the most violence is done by cis white men. I don't have a problem with that as a cis white man. And she went further and said, in the world, and I'm sorry, but if we want to look at the ranking tables, I've got a few contenders there. An A Hitler of Austria, a Stalin of the Soviet Union, a Putin now. There's lots of cis white men that have been responsible for a lot of bodies.
Yeah, and look, you got to, what you've said is true.
Wrong?
Yeah,
am I wrong?
But then you can look at Mao and you can look at Mugabe and you can look at, you can go the other way as well. But,
but also Rands.
Yeah. But, it's I just think the idea is, and this is me with my kind of political advisor hat on, which I have done in the past, is that you do need to walk this back. The statement that was made after the protest was too far. And on some level, and this might sound a little bit wanky, but it is an election year as well. Although I have read some things that are saying that the Green voter is actually going to help the Green Party. These comments, in other words, they'll be the people who will be repelled from this are never going to be supporting the Greens. The people that will be attracted to this are the people who are always supporting the Greens. However, in saying all of that, it still needs to be walked back and clarified. It needed to be, and it has been. And I think that the clarification is done. Of course, the media won't leave it at that.
No. I think it's a very clear clarification. I think she has absolutely boilerplated it out there. That's bulletproof, exactly what she meant. I think there's some lessons there. If you see someone from counterspin media approach, just swear your head off so they can't use any of it, or run them over with a car. Hit them with a motorbike. Seems to be fine.
We're not saying that. We're not saying that at all. Just very quickly, JN says perhaps it's Madame Tussauds rendition of Luxon. And Guru, I think, thinks it's a deep fake. So
to clarify, the man's a fake, not the image. Yes, yeah, very much so. Look, I've seen some comments online that there's a lot of people that have been really disappointed with Chris Hipkins' reaction to Marama's, how he's treated Marama on this. Yeah. I get a feeling that a few people have just gone, like, this has been a bad day for Labour. Because the other thing that was mentioned is that they've approved an oil exploration permit that squeaked in right at the end off Greymouth. That went through the courts. So I saw a lot of people are going, right, okay, cool. So Hipkins has done this, and this. Okay, no question I'm voting Greens now. So yeah, I don't think this has hurt the Greens at all. As you said, the people that are going after Marama on this, we're never going to vote Green.
Yeah,
Never
and look, I mean, I don't think this kind of thing should really be used actively to seek votes, but there's a world we live in where people will be attracted to things they hear, and this is a part of it. There's some very good comments. There's some very good comments coming in. Let's just get to some of these comments now, shall we? This is also, I think it's Winston Peters. He's done quite a bit for the horse racing industry, which is true. People who don't like horse racing or who think it's cruel won't like it so much, but for people who are, that's good, I guess. Rob says in every interview he just needs to be asked who these elites are and what his definition of woke is. Keep digging until he answers. But isn't this the same thing National do every time, including our beloved economy? Oh, this was when we're talking about national standards, and they screwed it up 10 years ago, and this is the downstream effects from it. Let me just see what else is going on in here.
I mean, while you're looking for more comments there, the other thing I'd say about this Marama thing is it's given me terrible PTSD to what got Toriana Toure out of Parliament.
Right.
You know, she made a brave and honest statement and was run out of Parliament, never to see her again. And I'd hate to see that happen again.
Yeah. All right. Famiko? They keep claiming that teachers and principals want this. This is talking about the teaching. I'm yet to find a teacher or principal that agrees with it. Yeah, it's so funny, when we think of all these questions and we wonder why the media who have access to these people don't ask them. Mr. Luxon, can you tell us some of the schools that you keep talking about you're visiting that want to see these changes? He probably wouldn't answer that question, which will be telling. But if he does answer that question, then go to that school, interview that principal, and then go to the 4 schools around that school and interview those principals. You know, I mean, that would be a pretty significant and easy way to dispel whether it's true or if it's not. More on schooling. Vicky says schooling these days can be very interesting and exciting compared to when I was at school. David, of course, points out with National's plans, as we said the other day, leaves 1.25 hours for other subjects for the rest of the day. JK says British MPs perform worse than 10-year-olds in maths and English exam. And then we're moving on to some comments about Marama. Maybe the Greens should announce they'll do a report into Marama's comment. Never say what the terms of reference are and never release the results. Very good. Very good. And JN says she made a mistake. It is men, not the color of the men. So that was the bit that needed to be walked back. And I think that's what she's done. Guru says, I'm starting to give a little to raise dollars or raise money for the cis white men hurt by the outrageous hurt and pain inflicted by Marama Davidson. And
finally, a payday.
Amos says, solidarity with cis white men. We stand with you. Hashtag, we stand with cis white men. There we go. And guess what, Chewy? We got through everything.
Yep.
Anything else?
I mean, I think that you know, Marama said it. I'm going to say it again. The narrative that Counterspin were pushing with that ambush and interview was that trans people were a greater threat to women overall. And that just doesn't stack up at all, ever, anywhere.
It's just such a dumb conversation because, like, I mean, because I've been involved in this 100,000 video play Twitter malarkey with you and Kelvin, I've looked occasionally at some of the things. And, you know, there's images going around of trans women who have committed crimes. Now, sure. So there's 6 images right there. Now here's the 60,000 images of non-trans women doing the same crimes who are men, males. You know what I'm saying? It's like you bringing up 6 examples and I don't even care if you bring up 1,000 examples. It's not that, but if you bring up 20 examples at a 7.5 million people about some kind of sexual crime or whatever crime, well, we'll bring up the million examples, and then what? Fools! It's just so stupid. It's so stupid. And the level of stupidity that I've seen with the Posey Parker supporters, just not having a clue. You know, like that one that tweeted back at me last night. I hope you talk about this, and it had a shot of the violence.
Oh, yeah, that was very funny.
And you did, and you said we did, and then I put the video up there, and guess what? We didn't hear from anything from that person after we showed them that we talked about it. So it's just stupid. Look, I don't want to sound like an elitist, or else Winston will never talk to me again. But it's just unintelligent conversation. Like, it's not thinking, not nuanced, unintelligent conversation. And I'm not up for that. What's the point? But at the end, that's why we're here, to show you it all.
Just a clarification for chat as well. I got a little bit wrong on the oil exploration thing. It's not off the coast of Greymouth. The company that has the permit is from Greymouth. It's off the coast of New Plymouth.
Oh, good. So it's well away from us. They can stay up there. It'll be fine if it's up there.
It's all going into the atmosphere.
NIMBY. Hey, thanks, team. Really enjoyed tonight's show. I know it was a bit kind of quicker and a bit more pacier tonight because we had more things to get through. Very much appreciate you lovely patrons. Let me just say this. We haven't had a new patron for a week or so. If there's someone out there who's a lurker, who's been watching for a while, who likes some of the work we're doing, who enjoys the commentary, and you'd like to come on board, next 24 hours would be a good idea. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. We have, I think, 7 layers of patrons. Cheapest is $5 a month. I think, is it $5 a month for a coffee runner? Goes up to $250 a month. And we'd love to have you on board. Help us pay a few little bills here and there and help support what we do in that way. Now, if you don't want to do that, then the other way you can support us is to be our advocates. We say this all the time. Tell people about what we're doing, share our content, direct people to us, help us to grow. So don't do the Patreon, fine. If you like what we're doing and you want to support us, then get behind us as an advocate. Become our little BHN reporter in the area where you are. Follow me and Chewy on Twitter. When you see us posting clips in that, pass them on. And thanks for being involved. However you choose to be involved, whether it's watching, whether it's advocating, whether it's being a patron. We love you all. We just love the patrons 22% more. Hey, Chewy, is that right?
That's true. It's like when your parents said that they love you and your sibling equally.
It's not true.
They were lying.
Yeah, it's not true. I'm the favorite. It's not true. All right. I think we're done. The chat's still going crazy. I think when we shut down here, the chat can still go on. If you guys want to keep chatting away, be nice to each other. Be nice to each other. And other than that, we'll be back tomorrow night. Now, for those of you who have texted me in the last, or tweeted me in the last wee while, the Naked Pastor, I have messaged him today. We'll hopefully be getting him on either tomorrow or the next day. It'll probably be a pre-record because he's in the US, which means if he's on the West Coast, it's 3 hours difference. If he's on the East Coast, it's 7 hours difference. So we're probably unlikely to get him live. Although if he's a late night person, maybe midnight-ish his time. Maybe it's 4 hours and 7 hours. So yeah, it's probably going to be a pre-record. But that also means if you're a patron and it's a pre-record, you'll get the interview as soon as it's done in the afternoon. And other than that, we'll just keep on keeping on. I've been talking with Afiso Collins this week. We're supposed to be doing a podcast this week. He's been tied up with some community work. There is a small chance, and I'll tease this. In radio, there was this Murphy's rule that if you ever tease something, it never happened. So it's probably not smart for me to do. But there is a small chance that we might do Friday night, but we might do it live. So rather than being the uploaded podcast that I have been doing the last few weeks, that if he's up for it and I'm up for it, that there might be a live one on Friday night, which means you could interact. But we'll see how that plans out. All right, as I've been talking about, another 100 comments came in, Chewy. Before we shoot off, is there anything else that's in there that's particularly amazing? Oh, there's lots of people saying bye. Oh, bye. 99. Yeah. 99, bye.
Overall, everybody in the chat loves us, and it's unwavering.
Everybody? That's not always a good sign.
Literally
echo chamber.
Everybody.
Really?
It's such an echo chamber. There is absolutely no dissension from our clear and acknowledged bias.
All right, team. Love you all to bits. We'll see you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Remember, the other thing you can do if you want to help share us around is our audio podcast that goes up about half an hour after the show. It's the same show, audio content, Apple Podcasts. Share that around, like, rate, and review it. Helps us go up the algorithms on Apple's charts and stuff as well. Just look up hashtag BHN. If you look up hashtag BHN, we pop up on Apple, on Google, and on Spotify as well. But if you're going to listen to us, then listen to us on Apple Podcasts because those have actual charts that mean something. All right, team, all the best. We're done. Catch you tomorrow night. Hooroo.
Go. Cheers.